So, we started this conversation talking about gigabit, and one of the funny parts around this is that the internet connection coming into your home becomes faster than what could be capable of your router. So, if you've got a device that isn't Wi-Fi 6 compatible, for example, it may not be able to handle the speeds that are actually coming into the home. And as a result, your devices aren't getting the full capacity that you could be getting from that type of plan. So, you do need to be looking at things like Wi-Fi 6, 802.11.AC and AX is the other names that you might be looking for on the box,
Mm.
and making sure that, yes, your router supports that, but also do your devices. You'll probably find
Mm.
that there's some older model laptops which have an older wireless standard built in. Even if you upgrade the router, the laptop itself might not be able to connect at those speeds. And the same thing for phones and others. So it really is time to audit the devices that are connecting in your home and understanding the limitations in terms of speed that you would get between the device to the router and then from the router out to the internet.
Now, last week on the show, we spoke about gigabit NBN and how it's rolling out across suburbs across the country, dependent on what type of NBN you have in your house or in your street, rather. This week, we thought we'd talk with Geoff Quattromani, friend of the show, tech expert, about how to make sure you are having the fastest Wi-Fi speeds in your home so that you can take advantage of better, improved, or faster NBN internet speeds into the home. How are you, Geoff?
I'm really well, Charlie. How are you?
I'm well. At the end of the day, we get given these wireless routers from a new NBN ISP as we sign up. Doesn't matter who it is. Most of them are created by a Wi-Fi router manufacturer for the cheapest possible price that meets the minimum spec as briefed by the vendor, and most are not very good. So we do need to look at new kind of hardware. The first question is, how do you choose between hardware that does this sort of whole home Wi-Fi or a solution that is a faster singular router? What's the breakdown in your mind of how that works?
Look, I think it's a couple of factors that people need to consider when choosing the right router for the home, and one of those could be either the physical size of the house and how far you need
Mm.
to actually move your Wi-Fi signal, but also how many people and devices are going to be using that Wi-Fi network as well. Because almost like adding lanes on a road, if you've got too many cars, you're going to have a bank of traffic, and if you've got more lanes, you allow the cars to travel smoother. So in the same way that if you've got a proper mesh system that covers the entire home, you've got fast connectivity for all devices to the network, then going back out to the internet. Whereas some of these other routers, they just can't handle the amount of devices that we're now connecting to the internet.
It was an interesting one. We got a question on the radio show on Saturday from somebody who said that they had 26 concurrently connected devices to their Netgear Nighthawk router. And they said the router was, they're just getting continuous dropouts for these connected devices. And I asked the listener, are you connecting them to both bands and the faster data requiring devices to the 5 gigahertz and the slower ones to the 2.5 gigahertz? And he wasn't. So
Yeah.
how much of this is not the right hardware and how much of it is user error? And how do we fix the user error bit?
That's a really good point. I think the way that you actually set up your network is something you need to spend time thinking about, whether it's devices that need to be prioritized over others, and having them perhaps on a different band, not a different network, but a different band, as you mentioned. I think that's extremely important to do. But to your point, 26 devices is high, but the current average is 17. So it's not
Mm.
incredibly, out of this world. So we are connecting more devices than ever to our network, whether it's our TVs, our smart speakers, our phones, obviously computers. Everything is being internet connected now. And as we start to build that up, we are putting a huge strain on the network. So you need to actually spread them out, have them share the load, and actually cover all the bands that you do have available on every router that you've got.
Parental controls,
Mhm.
or parental non-controls, as some people in the industry refer to them. Some of them are good, some of them are not. Some of them you pay for via subscription, some of them you don't. Some of them you require an extra piece of hardware to be plugged in. Some of them don't. They come built into the router. What do we need to look for when we're picking parental controls, and what should we be seeing in terms of behavior around the house to ensure that they are actually working?
Look, I think the first thing to say is that I don't think parental controls on a router should replace parenting. So I think that's always going to be the first thing, that people need to think that while you've got parental controls available, that doesn't mean that you completely become hands off when it comes to monitoring what your children are doing. The fact is that the current routers that we have available today usually also come with an app. And that means that you can control your home network easily just through an app on your phone. And that means you can actually do it from anywhere as well. So, if you're at work and the kids are at home, you can actually still control what they're accessing, what they're able to do on the internet. So I think you need to start thinking about things like the amount of time that they're allowed to spend using the internet, obviously the websites that they can visit as well. You'll always find that kids are going to be one step ahead of you when it comes to getting around certain restrictions. They're very good. They're very creative at finding these ways to do it. I remember when I was at school, we used to do it to get out of the school network. But at the end of the day, if you can measure and control what sites they're accessing and how long they're doing it, the router is a great place to start, but you can also be doing it on the devices themselves. So if they've got, an Apple device or even an Android device, there are parental controls that can be put in place on the device. Same thing with gaming consoles. Look at the parental control options there. There, again, is a huge amount of options. So I think it's tackling it at every entry point to try and gain some control. But again, it doesn't replace that conversation that you have with your kids to say, what are you looking at? Pass me your phone, show me what you're doing. And actually being in control of that experience too.
It is an interesting one. The hardware that we have, that we choose, it so often is determined by price. I mean, we can spend anywhere up to $1,000 now, depending on what kind of system you're going for. But we're also seeing very good solutions in that sort of $300 to $500 mark that really can control the load around the house quite well, that are even coming pre-configured or pre-built with this Wi-Fi 6 technology. Maybe talk a bit about Wi-Fi 6 technology and some things to look for in buying the right router for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we started this conversation talking about gigabit. And one of the funny parts around this is that the internet connection coming into your home becomes faster than what could be capable of your router. So if you've got a device that isn't Wi-Fi 6 compatible, for example, it may not be able to handle the speeds that are actually coming into the home. And as a result, your devices aren't getting the full capacity that you could be getting from that type of plan. So you do need to be looking at things like Wi-Fi 6, 802.11.AC and AX is the other names that you might be looking for on the box, and making sure that, yes, your router supports that, but also do your devices. You'll probably find that there's some older model laptops which have an older wireless standard built in. Even if you upgrade the router, the laptop itself might not be able to connect at those speeds. And the same thing for phones and others. So it really is time to audit the devices that are connecting in your home and understanding the limitations in terms of speed that you would get between the device to the router and then from the router out to the internet. And I think whether you're on an NBN 100 plan or even less, you need to actually be doing those speed tests from the device, from the router, to actually see what you're receiving and make sure it's actually completely accurate, because we've both had many complaints from people around the NBN. People will say they're not getting the speed that they signed up for, but they're doing a speed test on their smartphone in the backyard. And there are so many limitations as to why that would start to cause problems. You need to be doing those speed tests plugged into the router and get a real representation of what speed you're actually getting before you make that complaint.
It is always a good thing to have a look at, because it's one of those technologies in the home, maybe second only to the fridge, that we're using pretty much most of the time while we're awake. So having good hardware that is doing for you what you need it to do is a wise investment. We'll make this discussion, we'll have this discussion again another time in the future, because it's always topical. Geoff Quattromani, thanks for taking some time to talk to us today.
Thank you, Charlie.